those of you who maybe don't know me, my name is Tim Slade. I'm the creator of the eLearning Designers Academy. And when I'm not doing that, I'm also a freelance e-learning designer. For all of you who are just joining us, thank you so much for coming to this really awesome conversation with Cara North. I'll let Cara introduce herself in a moment, but a couple of quick housekeeping items as we jump in. First thing I always tell people is that these sessions are intentionally designed to be unstructured. Cara and I have maybe shared a couple of emails back and forth about what we want to talk about today, but where this conversation takes us will happen over the course of the next hour. We don't really have any idea where it'll take us. But part of that is making sure that we get to answer any questions you have really about anything, even though we're talking about climbing the corporate ladder in e-learning, instructional design, the learning industry in general. We're happy to answer any questions you have. So a couple quick things. I see many of you are already typing in chat. Awesome. Feel free to introduce yourself. Tell us where you're joining from. You'll also see to the right of the chat tab, there's a little talking bubble with a question mark. As Cara and I are talking, feel free to submit any questions you want to ask us about anything. And while you're there, you can upvote on other people's questions, and we'll be tackling the questions that get the most votes. So feel free to start submitting some questions. So, hi, Cara, how are you?
I was like typing frantically in
the chat. It's okay.
No, it's all good. Hey.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. I said this to you last week when we filmed the ATD Ask a Trainer episode, and I'll say this again while everybody's here. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you because one of the things that I like most about you is that you are one of the most authentic, vulnerable, tell it how it is people on in our industry. And I think one of the things that I don't know, I think vulnerability and authenticity is a very, I don't want to use the word attractive, but people like authenticity and people like vulnerability. And I've always appreciated that about you. So tell everybody a little bit about who you are, what do you do, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. So thanks, Tim, for having me. And by the way, I always hate this question because I always feel weird talking about myself. So so I'm Cara North, if I had a chance to meet you. I'm currently a training operations manager at Silfex, and we are part of Lam Research. Our main business is we manufacture silicon components that go into the machines that make semiconductors. So we're part of a very booming industry right now. So I have actually been in learning development for more than 10 years now. And like a lot of people, actually, Tim and I kind of a similar, I think, background in this. I fell into this like a lot of people. So when I actually originally went to school for journalism, and I graduated from the University of Kentucky, go Wildcats. And I grew up in Kentucky as well. My family is still there. And when I graduated, there were no jobs because that was when the recession hit. And so I moved back home with my parents and just really wanted any kind of job. They still got a newspaper back then. And so in the newspaper, there's a classifieds ad saying, open interviews at a call center. And I thought, well, it beats nothing. So I'm going to go do it. So I went in and I got this job at this call center. And I hated it. It was horrible because call centers are very interesting places. We'll leave it at that. But after I was there for a few months, they're like, hey, you seem semi-professional and you can fog a mirror. Would you like to be promoted? And I said, sure. That sounds lovely. And a small piece of that role was training. And so I did my first training with new hires coming into the business. And I went home. It was very serendipitous. I would told my family, I was like, this training thing, I love this. This is what I want to do the rest of my life. They're like, okay, whatever, what they didn't know. So anyway, I was working in this call center. The same time as I was working in this call center, Amazon was coming into the same city that I was working in, and they built this huge customer service center. And when it opened up, all of our best people left in droves. And so as our people left, they said, hey, Amazon, you're looking for a trainer. There's one over here at this other call center. You should get her. And so I came over to Amazon to do that. And so I did a lot of the stand-up training stuff for Amazon customer service as well as Kindle. And then I just just had this conversation with my manager because a lot of the stuff was very regimented. So there was like facilitator guides, and I was kind of just given everything to do, and I didn't really have a lot of autonomy to change things, right? So I had to kind of follow the standards of everything. And I went to my boss one day. I was like, "Who writes this?" And I was like, "There's a lot of things that need to be fixed." He's like, "Oh, that's the instructional design team, and maybe I think we're going to have a position actually open here. Is that something you'd be interested in?" And I said, "Sure." And so that's how I became an instructional designer at Amazon. So it was, very, very quick with that. So I was there for a little bit. I actually was working in an office. I missed kind of that human connection. So as I was working there, I also worked at an adult education center in the evening to help people that were looking to transition careers. I helped with GED classes just to get kind of face-to-face experience. So I did that. And then I fell in love, and I moved to Columbus, Ohio in 2013. And when I moved up here, I looked for a new job, and I found a job at the Ohio State University. And I took that job because they said, "Hey, if you work here, you can get free tuition." And I said, "Sign me up." So I worked there for 7 years and got my master's, and then finishing up my doctorate right now in learning and technology. So I was there for 7 years. And then last May, I transitioned into the role that I'm currently in at Silfex. So that's kind of my career journey in a nutshell.
That's awesome. I'm not going to go into the whole details about my career journey because it's, I could go on and on and on about it. For anyone who's curious, I used to catch shoplifters for a living and then somehow managed in learning and development. But what I find so interesting is I think a lot of folks they have a particular career path that they start advancing into, and somewhere along the lines, for a lot of people, somebody goes, "Hey, you're good at that. You should be teaching others how to do that thing, whether it's catching shoplifters or something else." And you don't realize it in the moment because you think you're advancing your career in one way, but you're really going on this exit ramp where you discover a totally different career path that you never even knew existed. I mean, I remember when I got into training as a training coordinator for the loss prevention department at Kohl's department stores. I didn't even know what instructional design was, and that I was doing instructional design, and until I realized I liked what I was doing, and it made me research it some more. So, the reason I wanted to have this conversation with you, Cara, is because I think a lot of people in our industry, whether you're new, you're experienced, wherever you're at in your career path or your career journey, I think a lot of people, I know this is true for me, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Cara. A lot of people get to a point where they're trying to figure out what's next. Like, what's the next step? How do I advance my career? How do I make more money as an instructional designer or a trainer or whatever it is that however you define yourself as a learning professional? And I think for a lot of people, they think the answer is moving into leadership or moving into managing teams. And while that is one way, it's not the only way. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about that in more detail. But I'm curious, like, as you've looked to grow your career and advance, I don't know, did you experience a similar question or conundrum of like, what do I do next? Is it moving into leadership? I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I love putting things together. I love like matching kind of everything together. And so the thought of kind of giving that up was something that was really kind of difficult at first, but then, I was really hungry for a leadership role, and I knew about 2 or 3 years ago, I was like, I am going to move into leadership if it kills me. Like, I am going to move into leadership. I'll do whatever it takes to kind of get there. So for me, it was a little bit different because I did want that leadership role. And I have to say now, a year in, I really do enjoy it. I enjoy it a lot. Now, do I still miss development and
Good.
stuff? Of course, but I'm glad that I made the decision that I did. So but to your point, Tim, I do think that there's a lot of different things you can do that doesn't have to necessarily be leadership. So, for example, if you're looking to kind of grow your career, as long as you're at your current organization has no problem with it. And again, I would check this, by the way. This is very important to check. If they don't have a problem with you maybe having a little consulting business on the side or something, I think that's a great way to get some more leadership skills. And again, pad a little bit of that bank account as well, because you make extra money on the side, right? And again, working kind of for yourself on an individual project without other constraints you may have in your organization, it's freeing and scary at the same time. But it can help you see kind of what maybe your next step is. It's a nice way to kind of test the water. If you're scared to do it that way, another thing I recommend to people is, connect with other freelancers and see if there's any like little pieces of projects that they might want to subcontract out to you. So for example, if you love doing Beyond videos, or you like doing video editing or something like that, offer that service to independent consultant and see if it's something they could potentially subcontract to, again, get a little extra cheddar, and then also, again, try something out a little bit different.
Yeah, those are great tips. So I'm curious. So it sounds like when you moved into leadership and climbed that corporate ladder and got a corporate, a learning leadership role, managing a team, you did it knowing full well that it was going to take you away from, the actual design and development work. Is that correct?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
So, higher ed was good to me in the sense that I was able to, get that foundational education that I was missing kind of in the accidental ID world. But I also missed the fast-paced environment of a corporate role. And I think getting my formative experience at Amazon did kind of spoil me, because I went from doing 50, 60 campaigns a year to like 3 classes a year. And I'm like, what do you all do with all this time? And they're like, what do you mean we all this time? And I'm like, what? So I actually was craving kind of a more fast-paced environment. My friends are like, are you sure? Because you're kind of like a turtle right now. Can you go back into the sprinting? I was like, yeah, I can go back in. But really what compelled me to the role that I'm currently in, though, Tim, is they said, we need somebody to build it from the ground up. And I was like, all these ideas just started coming in, like, oh my gosh, like I can build the team and the department of my dreams. Like, oh my gosh. And full disclosure, had a lot of imposter syndrome. I thought a lot. I was like, am I ready? Am I good enough? Can I do this? And really it just came down to, I'm going to try. I mean, that's the best I can do. And if it's not the right fit for me, then I'll go get, another role. But I said, I'll give it my all. And, I'm still here. So
It's interesting. Yeah. I had a very similar, I had two, I'll call it two jaunts with corporate America. Originally the way I got into learning development was with Kohl's department stores. I was working in their stores, catching shoplifters, moved to Wisconsin to be in their training department for loss prevention. And that's when I realized, okay, I'm going to continue doing e-learning and instructional design. And eventually I left Kohl's department stores, and I was really, and this isn't anything bad about Kohl's. I mean, it was a great time and I grew so much during my time there, but I was really disheartened by corporate culture, corporate politics, and we can go into a lot of detail about that. And so I took a job as an e-learning project manager for the state of Wisconsin in their Department of Corrections. And I'll tell you, it was such a culture shock moving from, a company, a national company with 150,000 employees, working in a corporate office with 7,000 other people with huge budgets, moving to the Department of Corrections for a state agency with no money, no equipment, no anything. I don't know if anybody follows or knows Melanie Sobey. She's she's on Twitter a lot. She was the one who got me hired there, and we still connect online every now and then. And I was there for 13 months, and I got the heck out of there. Not because Melanie was fantastic, but I just was not a good fit for that. And so I remember at that time, this was in 2012, 2013. I said to myself, I said two things. I'm never going to manage a team, and I'm never going back to corporate America. I was determined on those two things. And so I ended up working for Diane Elkins at Artisan eLearning, and I was managing her sister business called eLearning Uncovered, which was training, books on storyline and stuff like that. And I was there for several years. And I remember in 2016, I was my boss, Diane, was the owner of this company. I was her employee. And at the time, I was like, gosh, I want to make more money. I want to advance my career. I want more experiences. And unless she dies and gives me the company, that's not going to happen here, And I loved working for Dan. It was a great experience. But I remember getting that feeling of like, I need more. I need more challenges. And so I did the two things that I said I would never do. I ended up taking a director of instructional design job at GoDaddy, managing a team of e-learning designers. And part of the reason I took that job was for the same thing that you said a moment ago, Cara, which was I was given the opportunity to build this team from scratch. And I inherited this at the time. It was a small team. It was 4 people who were former classroom facilitators. And it was my job to turn them all into e-learning developers. And as a fun fact, the eLearning Designer's Handbook, that whole book came from my first year of teaching these people how to be e-learning designers, developers. After I did that, I realized I had a book there, and that's why I wrote that book during my time there. By the time I left GoDaddy, and this is and then we'll get to some questions because we have tons of questions coming in the question spot. By the time I left GoDaddy in 2019, I was only there maybe two and a half years. My team went from 4 people, all here in the Phoenix area in person, which was great, to a team of 18 people, I think at the most, as far west as Seattle and as far east as Munich, Germany. And by the time I left there, nothing about my job, and this isn't anything against GoDaddy or the people there. I know everybody. I'm still friends and close with everybody that was on my team. I loved my team. It was really hard to leave them, but nothing about my job involved instructional design or learning. I was managing performance reviews, dealing with people's fees, going to meetings all the time that sometimes had nothing to do with learning. And I hadn't even touched storyline in like a year and a half. But the reason I took that job, and I don't know if this has been true for you, Cara, part of the reason I took that job was I knew that, moving into that leadership role not only would help me fund eventually going out on my own, and it did. Like if I didn't have that job and it paid well, I don't think I would have ever been able to start my own business. And B, it gave me some really, really good experience into what it is that corporate L&D managers are really dealing with in their job. And oftentimes it's not, how do you make a cool scenario and storyline? It's like, how do you actually deliver business results for the organization, And so even though I had a really, and I'll say now, and this, I'll probably lie when I say this, a couple years from now, I'll never manage a team again. I'll never go back to corporate America. But I gained so much from that experience. I don't know. I know that's a long tangent, but I don't know. Do you have a similar experience, Cara?
Yeah, no, I totally do. And, kind of my end game here is if I don't kind of go off on my own, I do want to be a CLO eventually. And there's not enough women
That's awesome.
in learning leadership, period. I mean, if you look at the field across the board, there are a lot of women practitioners, but there's not enough women directors, not enough women business owners, not enough women CLOs. So I want to shatter that glass ceiling. So
You're so correct.
Yeah, so I really would like to get there. However, what's interesting about CLO role, and I've sought mentorship from a couple of CLOs I talked to, is that, if you look at like who becomes the CEO of a company, have you ever heard of a CLO who's become a CEO of a company?
A CLO that's become a CEO? Maybe, but the concept of a CLO is only, I guess I would say, relatively new. It's usually been the heads of HR.
True.
But yeah, I've seen that. So I would say that I've heard of that. I'd have to think a little bit more, but I'm sure.
But yeah, to your point, it is a more of a newer role, but I do think like there's that precedent of if you're in this, having kind of that practitioner knowledge and learning and development isn't enough. You're going to have the business chops to go along with it, right? So
totally.
That's actually one thing my boss is the senior director of operations and just brilliant, right? And so in my last performance review, I told him, I said, listen, this is where I want to go. And I know you have all this business savvy. I'd like for you to help me get there. And he said, oh, absolutely. He said, I'd be happy to do so. So knowing that, again, I'm going to have to continue to put more work in to get to where I need to go. I think that that is a theme hopefully you can take away from today, is if you want to be in leadership, you can't just sit around and be like, well, I wonder if they're going to leadership jobs going to follow sky today. It's not. You got to work for it. And I realize that sacrifice, you have to do extra work sometimes, but if you really want it and you're hungry, I think that there's an opportunity out there for you. But at least in my experience, a lot of people that I know that's like, oh, I wish I was in a leadership role. I'm like, well, what are you doing to help yourself? Oh, well, I'm just hoping they notice me over here. And it's like,
no, oh no, that's no. You have to, if you want to move up, you got to make. I had a friend at Kohl's who she was just so set on the fact that she deserved to be promoted, and she did. She deserved to be promoted, but she wanted to sit there and wait for them to hand it to her because she earned it. And she sat there in the same job for like 12 years and it never happened. And you have to do more than earn it. You have to make it happen. And that's where and some people don't like that. That's where the corporate politics comes into play. And as much as people don't like hearing this, and as much as it's icky and not fun, you got to make friends with the right people, and you got to bring the right ideas, and you got to convince them that you're the person who needs to be put into leadership. And there's a lot of other stuff that goes into that. And a lot of times it involves being and acting in the capacity of that leader before they'll promote you for it. And that's, I think a lot of people don't like that because they'll say, well, it's not part of my job description. I'm not being paid for this. Well, yeah, but you gotta put in the effort, and then they'll see your value, hopefully. And if not, then maybe you need to move on. What I was going to say though, was one of the things that I think you make a really great point about, for you, and this was true for me too, when I look back on it retrospectively, but I think you're doing this more intentionally, is that you're moving into leadership with a very specific intention about not what you're doing right now, but what it's going to help you do tomorrow. And I think for me, when I look back on retrospectively on my time at GoDaddy, I didn't know when I was going to eventually start my own business, but that was the stepping stone to get me there financially and gave me the right experience with understanding how the sausage is actually made within corporate L&D. And so I think that's really important. A takeaway for people is that if you want to move up, it can't just be because you want more money or because you want to arbitrarily become a leader. It's about what is that move into leadership really going to help you do long-term in your career. And I think a lot of people, and this is something that I think is hard for some folks, is when they take a job at a corporate environment or any job, we often put on this mindset of, what am I going to do for this organization? What am I going to offer them? And oftentimes I think we need to shift the focus and go, no, what is this organization and my time in this role going to do for me?
Yep.
Not just what are you going to contribute? What is that going to contribute to your career? Right.
Yeah. And if I can dovetail on that, I will give you something that one of my mentors told me that I wish I would have had 5 years sooner is, I knew I was wanting to look outside for another role and everything. And she told me, she said, you don't owe that organization anything. You need to shift your mindset to you're self-employed, and that organization is your client. And I'm telling you, it just completely changed the way that I handle it. If I had a bad day at work, so what? They're a client. I can go get another one, right? So it took the power away from the organization, gave the power back to me, right? When I had that
totally
mindset.
Agree. When I left Kohl's, I became an e-learning designer, an instructional designer at Kohl's department stores. That's where that happened for me. And I remember when I left Kohl's, I remember having this feeling of like they owned my expertise that I grew there because I grew it there. And once I left Kohl's, I realized I had to make myself understand that no, I own my expertise. I own my skill set. I own my talent, and I don't need to let them have it. I can take it and use it elsewhere.
Yep.
And I think that's hard for some folks because we're just ingrained in, at least here in the United States, and I'm sure it's true in other areas of the world, but especially here in the United States, we are just groomed from childhood that, you grow up, you go to school, you go to college, and then you get a corporate job and you give all of your loyalty to corporate America, and then you maybe retire 40 years from now. And that's just not how it is anymore. Yeah. Okay, cool. So there's a lot of conversations happening in chat. We have some questions coming in, and let's tackle some questions. I'm going to go over to the questions pod and let's see what's been upvoted. Let me make sure they're sorted by number of votes. Okay, let's go ahead and do our first question from Paula O'Brien. Hey, Paula. Paula wants to know, are there any tips you can give to people who are unable to advance within their current 3-person team unless the training director moves up and might need to jump to another company or move up? So I think you answered your own question in that, Paula, but I'll let Cara, do you have any thoughts on that before I give my take?
I feel this in my soul, Paula, because I just knew there was no way I was going to move up at my last job. Like I did all the work. I kicked butt on all my performance reviews. I begged and begged and begged. I was like, please, I want stretch assignments. I want to move up. And then I get the, well, we don't promote like that here. You got to wait your turn, right? So I let it bother me for about a day or two, and then something just went off in my head. I was like, like I can actually get leadership skills outside of my day job. And so ATD actually was a godsend for me at that time, because I got involved with my local chapter and I ran for president, and I actually had imposter syndrome even about doing that. But I have a good friend named Joe Suarez that's like, yeah, you should totally do it. So I did it and I won. And through that experience, I got to manage budgets. I got to manage like a board of directors. I got to oversee events, things that I couldn't do in my day to day. I got outside. And so when I actually interviewed for the role that I'm currently in, when they asked me how I dealt with difficult people or, having performance conversations with people, that was a question that I got in my new role. I could tell them, hey, I was board directors of a board of volunteers, and that's even harder because you're not paying them money to be there and having that difficult conversation. So again, I had to do extra work. It took time away from my family, took time away from my education and all that fun stuff. But I did it to plant a seed to get where I wanted to go. So don't feel like you have to get that experience in your current organization. There's other places you can get that extra experience, those stretch assignments. And nobody batted an eyelash in my interview of like, well, but you didn't get that at where you worked at. They didn't care. They just want to make sure I could do it. Right.
Yep. Yeah. I agree with that. And I'll yes to everything you just said, Cara. And I'll add, the best thing I've ever done for my career, and this is another mind shift, and I think the stigma about what I'm about to say needs to go away. I have never stayed in a job or an organization probably more than 2.5 years. And that's because I get really bored really easily. And if after 2.5 years, and it comes down, it's like clockwork. 2.5 years will come and I'll go, okay, I've done all I can here. I'm not growing. I'm bored. And if I'm not going to advance here, then I'm going to go advance somewhere else. And, the stigma about that is people go, well, that's job hopping. Well, you know what? So what? Call it whatever the heck you want. I have learned and grown so much through job hopping, if you call it that. 2.5 years is a long time to spend anywhere, in my opinion. But by doing that, I've gained I've worked at, Kohl's department stores and retail. I've worked for the state of Wisconsin. That was only 13 months, but that was horrible. I've worked for small companies where I was employee number 7. I worked at GoDaddy where it was a big company and I was a call center. All of those experiences help shape who I am today and what I'm able to do. And when you stay somewhere, if it's not going to happen, then take ownership and go, you know what, I'm going to make it happen somewhere else. And whether you do stuff on the side or you start looking, don't be a passive person to your career. Own it. And if you have to move out, then get the heck out. And, you'll end up making more money and gain more experience, in my opinion. So, okay. Cool. Thank you, Paula. Great question. Okay, let's do our next one. Our next one comes from, hold on, my computer's being weird. Okay, there we go. Okay, our next question comes from Helena. Hey, Helena. And Helena wants to know, what are the next steps for an instructional designer who has been in his or her role for 2 to 3 years? Advancement advice. That's a hard one. I think that's up to you. Like, what do you want out of your career? Do you want to continue doing instructional design and you really love being the instructional designer? Maybe that means freelancing or doing more on the side. I guess it really depends on what do you want out of your career and what's your motivation. Is it making more money? Then maybe you move into a senior instructional design role, or maybe you do move into leadership and you discover if that's right for you. So I don't know. Cara, what do you think on that? I think it's contextual.
Yeah, I totally think it's contextual, but kind of if you want to go into a leadership role, kind of two big things that you can start honing now that's going to pay dividends for you in the future. Number one, project management. You got to be able to help manage projects. My team currently right now, we have 43 open training projects as I'm speaking right now. And I have a team of 6. So knowing kind of how to help alleviate burdens and move things around, and then have those conversations of, hey, you missed this deliverable, what's going on, how can I help you? Knowing that, I think, is good. But I think the most critical one, Tim, I think you'll agree with me on this, it's not enough to report the news, report the impact. So actually, Jolt, I saw him in the chat. He has like a really cute article about it, and Jolt, please correct me in the chat, but he wrote
put the
something
link in there.
Yeah, put the link in there, but something about, I think he said, do hospitals measure success on the number of patients they serve? Right? I mean, and I think that's a metric a lot of people mention in L&D. Oh, well, this course had 2,000 users or whatever. Great. But what was the impact to the business, right? So if you can hone in on that now, and if you don't know how, lean into your leadership or lean into other people in the field that maybe you admire to help have those conversations. But if you can report the impact of things along with project management, you're going to be sitting very pretty in that candidate pool for L&D leadership.
Yeah, agreed. And I would also say one of the things I've learned in my career is that I think sometimes people will sit idly waiting for the universe to tell them what their next step should be. And that's never going to happen. The only way you can figure out where you want to go is by doing a lot of things and figuring out what you like or don't like. I mean, in my career, I've done a lot of different things to realize, oh yeah, I like mentoring people, but I don't like managing people, right? I had to become a leader and a manager to realize and understand that distinction, or realize, oh, I really love e-learning development, but I'm not a big fan of like needs analysis and the upfront instructional design. I really like the development piece. And I only learned that by putting myself in those situations where I had to do those things and realize, oh, this is what I liked, what I didn't like. And so the more experience you can gain, to Cara's point, go do a lot of the project management parts of instructional design or the needs analysis or the evaluation or whatever the case might be, you'll understand where your strengths are and what your interests are. And then what the next step is will become so much more clearer to you because you'll realize what you want or don't want. Yeah. Great. Okay. Heather asks a really great question. Let me wait for this platform to register that I've stopped answering. Okay, here we go. We're going to answer Heather's question. Heather Larson wants to know, what options are there for someone who wants to move up, get paid more, and perhaps mentor others, but still be heavily involved in the day-to-day work of instructional design and e-learning development? When I look at my supervisor does, it looks miserable. All admin work, none of the ID stuff. And, I will say from experience, this is not true of all learning leadership roles. I imagine that when I was at GoDaddy towards the end, when my team looked at me, I probably looked miserable. I was miserable. My advice, and Cara, I'll let you jump in on this as well, of course, because you're here, you're my guest. I'm not going to let you. You will answer after I answer. You know what I mean. I felt weird saying let, like I was giving you permission.
Stop, we're friends. It's all good.
Yeah. My advice is then do things like we were talking about earlier outside of your job. Go do some freelance work, go do some development work in the industry, and whether that's eLearning Heroes Challenge or creating your blog or your portfolio, doing work outside of your job. If you still want to be an instructional designer, but you want some additional experience in instructional design and grow your skills, it's not going to happen in your 9-to-5 job creating compliance courses, in my opinion. So go do stuff outside of work that fulfills that creative thing. That's what I had to do when I was miserable in my leadership role at GoDaddy. Every minute I had free outside of work, I was like, I'm going to open up Storyline or create a thing just so I could have a little bit of my creative freedom. That's when I realized, okay, yeah, I need to get out of leadership. So sorry, Cara, go ahead.
No, so I think I'm still in the romantic phase of my role because my team is still small enough to where I'm not doing as much of the admin heavy lifting stuff. Now, as the team grows, Tim, you told me you had a team of 18 at one point global. Yeah, I can see why you're going to be buried in administrative stuff, but I'm pretty fortunate. My team is a little bit more smaller and intimate right now. And then, I agree if it got to that point where it was just admin stuff all day, I don't think I would enjoy it as much. But because I am kind of growing the team, setting standards of expectations of what we want things to look like, what we want them to include, how what our knowledge management process looks like. But because we're still in that phase, I think I'm very hands-on and I still touch things. I had two people out actually a couple weeks ago, and there was a rise that needed updated. And I was like, I didn't even tell the team. I just did it because I was like, ooh, I get to, I was like, it's been a hot minute, so I didn't even tell them. I just went in and did it myself. But no, I am still very hands-on. But to Tim's point, it can get a little bit cumbersome depending on how large the organization is, how large the team is. But yeah, I agree with you, Tim. If it gets to that point, that's probably when I'll fly away. So.
Yeah, 18 people was too much. Trust me.
Say, yeah.
Imagine trying to write 18 unique and accurate and interesting performance reviews all at the same time.
No.
Yeah. I don't recommend it. Yeah. Unless you're really into drinking alcohol, because I became really into drinking alcohol during that time. So let's move on. Okay, let's do another question. All right. I apologize if I'm going to get your name wrong. Dorada, I hope that's your name. Okay, so Dorada wants to know how typically promotions within companies are determined. Ooh, this is a good one. I have a lot of insight into this I can get from my experience. How are promotions typically determined within companies? How to show them you're ready to step up? In what ways to be for people to notice you and promote you? Cara, why don't you start, and then I can give my thoughts on this. And I think it varies from organization to organization, but I'm curious if you have any thoughts on this initially.
Yeah, so I'm going to keep it real. I think as a woman, you have to work harder. I do. I think that you have to go above and beyond as a woman. It's sad, but it's true. So whatever your male colleagues are doing, do 25 to 35% more than that. I hate to say that, but I think that at least in my experience, that has definitely been true. And I think it kind of depends, at least in organizations that I've had previous roles in, promotions. Even if it was a promotion earmarked for somebody, they still had to advertise it, and they still had to put it out there for people to apply. You still had to go through the formal interview process. Now, at one institution I was at, when they would post that, they would say an internal candidate is being considered for this role. Other organizations I've been at, they've posted and you had no idea about that information, right? So I don't know. I think that that's kind of the way that it is, but also think I also hate to say this, Tim, I think your leader can also make or break this for you, right?
Totally.
So if you have a leader that really cares about you, wants to grow you, and I think the best mark of a leader is somebody going off and leaving you, right? I mean, if you have done your work in developing that person, they need to go somewhere else. They don't need to be under you forever, right? Yep. So I think that also plays into it. And I've had tough conversations where I wasn't getting what I needed out of my first line supervisor, that I would go to my skip level. And in one place, I had a better relationship with my skip level than my boss, because my boss didn't know what was going on, but my skip level knew that I was the one that kind of kept that department together. So, I think your mileage may vary, but again, sad but true. I do think women have to work a little bit harder.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's not a fun truth, but it's true. Because to your point earlier, there are more men in leadership roles in general in corporate America, but within learning as well, than there are women, and that creates a barrier to entry. I'll be really honest as well about this. I've seen this in a couple of different organizations, and it varies from organization to organization and the politics that are at play and all of that. But in the couple of places I've seen this has been true. At the end of the day, the most important thing you have to remember is that there is absolutely nothing fair or equitable about how people are paid, about how people are promoted, how people are elevated. There's nothing fair about it. And the sooner you realize that, and I don't like corporate politics, but the sooner you understand the corporate politics, the better you can, I don't want to say play them, but realize what you're up against and try to adapt yourself for them. So let me give you an example. I'm not going to say names, but in previous jobs where I've worked in corporate America, promotions were based on, I'm going to say, 3 criteria. First, of course, there's always what's the organizational need? What do we need somebody in a leadership role? Do we need somebody in this senior role to take on these additional responsibilities? Maybe we need somebody to manage a team because we're reorganizing, whatever the case might be. It's organizational, just being selfish. Like, what do we need? Second, it would be, who do we not want to lose that we might want to retain, and retain them through a promotion and thus a raise? Again, completely selfish, not about the person necessarily, but how do we retain that talent? And then third and finally, does that person warrant a promotion for some reason? Mm-hmm. And that's always been the last one. And it's not fair. It's not fair. I didn't make the rules. Cara didn't make the rules, but it's true. And so typically, most organizations will promote primarily once a year, sometimes twice a year, mid-year and end of year. And in both cases, in my experience, we knew who we were promoting weeks or sometimes months in advance based off of retention. And so what I always told my team, and this was true at GoDaddy and other times I've led teams, is that when they would have skip levels with my boss, I had to remind them, in our learning department, there's like 100 people, and you get this 30 minutes with that person. Yep. That person, that VP, we'll say Bob is the name of the VP. Bob is only going to remember you by those 30 minutes. So what are you going to do in those 30 minutes to make an impression about, and sometimes people on my team would spend those 30 minutes talking about their dog that day or their cat that day. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But the people who were successful and people who got promoted and the people that made it easier for me to go to bat for them as a leader spent those 30 minutes showing how they were contributing to the business.
Yep.
And bettering the department. So that when it did come time for me as a leader to go to bat for whoever was on my team, Bob, the VP, would go, oh yeah, that's right. Susie talked about, she did this really great compliance course and they did all these great things, or whatever the case might be. So it's, yeah, I don't know. Cara, you're saying a lot of yeses. I don't know if anything I've said resonated.
No, I completely agree. The strategy of the skip level is absolutely genius. Really making sure you take those opportunities, and not even just the skip level, but other leaders in the company, right? Yeah, that's the cool thing about learning development is nobody's really asking questions when somebody from learning and development reaches out on their calendar, right? They may think that you're wanting to learn more about what they do in the org. I mean, because it sits in this weird spot spot of where, it's kind of got the keys of the kingdom to kind of see around the edges of the business. So, being strategic and making those partnerships, increasing what I call your relational equity in the business. You just never know when those relationships can pay off. So don't be afraid of reaching out to other leaders in other sectors of the business, because they could also have insights and nudges to help you get to that next level as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think what you're talking about, the way I would totally agree with you, and the way that I illustrated this for my team at GoDaddy is I would talk about your political capital. Like, build political capital with your stakeholders. Get your stakeholders promoting you when they go talk to Bob,
Absolutely.
the VP, and go, "Oh my gosh, I just worked with Cara and she was so awesome on this." Like, all of those little things, that's the politics that nobody likes playing, but it does, it helps. The other thing I'll say too is, and I think you alluded to this a moment ago. I was going to say something else, but it escaped me. So what I was going to say though, Cara, you alluded to this, is that, if your boss isn't going to bat for you, despite the fact that you're making it easy for them, like if you're trying to illustrate how you're contributing, doing all those things and making it easy for your boss to go bat for you, if they're not going to bat for you, that's your moment to take a sign that they're probably never going to go to bat for you. Yeah. And that's when you have to go, okay, either I'm going to stay in this position or I'm going to move on. You have to make that hard decision for yourself. That's going back to what I was saying earlier with Paula's question. Don't be just a passive person to your career. Own it and go, is it going to happen here? Yes or no? And move on. You might discover through that process that not threatening to move on, but considering it becomes leverage that could get you promoted in that organization. Yep. So it's not fair. Nothing's fair about it. And that sucks. But it's true. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Dorada. Okay, so let's do. We have about 15 minutes left. We can do a few more questions here.
You want to do speed round? I love speed round.
I know. Well, we'll try, but I am such a wordy person. So I'll let's try. Let's try. Okay. Like, how many questions do we want to do in speed round?
I don't know. I'd like to get through all of them. I'm that person.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so let's go ahead. Hillary wants to know. It sounds like sometimes you have to be ready to move companies to continue to grow. What are some of the companies that show growth within L&D? Cara, go.
Honestly, I think the best way to figure this out is connecting with people across the industry and just seeing kind of what L&D is doing in their neck of the woods. I think just looking on the outside, I think there's a lot of companies people admire, but then if they knew what their L&D department was, I don't think they'd admire them as much.
That's so true.
I do think a lot of places are messes, even though they may have big names. I'll just leave it at that. So I think connecting with other people to get a pulse check of that is probably the best way.
Yeah. An emerging area in our industry is customer education, which usually falls under the marketing team. But now the customer education is hiring more and more instructional designers. And it's this weird gray area between marketing and L&D. That's a great place to look. There's a lot of emerging stuff there.
And tech. It's a
lot
of tech too, yeah.
Great. That was Hillary's question. That was the shortest sentence I think I've ever made in my life. Okay, let's do Nicole's question. Nicole wants to know, best advice to start moving up from a senior role into leadership. Been informally leading for years and trying to land my first L&D leader role. I'll start this one. Your selling point is not talking about, this is a great area. When people want to get into instructional design and e-learning, it's all about your skills. Like, what can you do? Getting into leadership has nothing to do with skills. They don't care how well you can use storyline, how well you're a good graphic designer or instructional designer. They want to know, can you lead people? Can you manage people? Can you manage people out if you need to? And can you drive results through learning? That would be my tip there.
Completely agree. I think when you're in a senior role, it's about you, but when you transition to leadership, it's about them. And so that's why a lot of new leaders fell, because what got them into a leadership role was being, taking care of themselves. And that's why a lot of them fell, and why there's a lot of bad leaders, because they go back to what they know, taking care of themselves, and forget about the team. So if you can transition about how you grow others and support others, I think that's a great first step.
Yes, I agree with that. All right, this one's for you, Cara. Caroline wants to know, what is your doctoral thesis dissertation about?
Sure. So it is an action research qualitative dissertation about the articulate e-learning hero community. Specifically, I wanted to know why people participate in it. And it's been fascinating interviewing multiple people about what they've gotten out of it. There's some really interesting things I won't go too far into depth about, but I think it's pretty amazing that there's over 800,000 members of the articulate communities, like the that's subscribed to it, and there are people weekly building things out. It's just fascinating to study. So that's what my dissertation's on.
It is. Did you get to interview anyone from Articulate as part of did they talk to you about it?
Yes, I'm going to be talking to David Anderson.
Oh, good. Awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, cool. All right. Sarah wants to know, and the system is going slower than I can click these buttons, but that's okay. Sarah wants to know, how is your team structured? I'm building my own instructional design team from the ground up too.
Oh,
I'll start
nice.
with this. Originally my team at GoDaddy was 4 people, and then once we grew to 18, I realized I can't manage 18 people. So what we did is we added levels of leadership. And so the way I structured my team at GoDaddy, and this is not true for all organizations, but we had instructional design teams for the different customer groups that we managed within the organization. So we had a little instructional design team for call center training, instructional design team for corporate, instructional design team for engineering. Some other teams do it totally differently, where they have learning program managers doing needs analysis, instructional designers doing instructional design for everything, and then developers doing development, whatever the topic might be. So I've seen those two organizations. What about you, Cara?
Yeah, so my team is still fairly small. There's 6 of us, 7 if you count me. So basically, everyone is they're called technical instructors, which is the title my org gives to it. I'm not a huge fan of it, but c'est la vie. So they specialize in different areas. So I have a couple people that are like video gurus. I have a couple e-learning developers. I have one person that's taken on the LMS administration. I got a couple people that facilitate instructor-led training. So everybody kind of has a little specialty niche with the intention to cross-train and give everybody at least a baseline in the other areas.
Good. Awesome. All right. I don't know if we're going to get through all 13 questions, so but it's okay. You can connect with Cara and I offline or in the community or wherever. Okay. Why don't Cara, are you able to see the questions pod by chance?
Yeah.
Why don't you pick a question? Just tell me what the name is and I'll record the answer.
Okay. How about I don't like doing this. I don't like picking. I just go with the top one there. I see Brenda. Is that Brenda's question about
That
mentors?
sounds right. Yeah. That's a
Okay.
good question. You're the perfect
Yeah.
person to answer this one.
Oh, no, I'm not. What are you talking about? So I think the best way to get a mentor is to just make relationships with people. I'm of the firm belief that a mentor will not ask you for their credit card number. I would not be where I am today had people not given me their time to kind of learn from and grow under. There's a lot of wonderful people, even some people here in this chat that have given me their time throughout the years. That's really helped me more than I could possibly say. And so I believe I'm in a position now that it is my professional obligation to pay it forward to other people. But one thing I have noticed, and Tim, I'm sure you've probably seen this too, don't be entitled about it. I will not respond when you say, I need to do this, or you demand a meeting with me or whatever. I don't have time to deal with that. So build a relationship with people, be kind, and then when it's appropriate, pay it forward in the future.
Yeah, I think it's easier to answer of how to not find a mentor than it is how to find a mentor. I agree with you. It's important to understand the difference between mentoring and coaching. If you're looking for formal coaching, formal development, that's something you'll probably have to pay for. But mentorship is a relationship you're building with somebody where that mentor is investing in you and you're investing back with them, and you both grow as a result of it. And so the people that I've mentored are the ones who take the time to send really thoughtful messages, whether it's on LinkedIn or email. If you take the time to it's somebody you really want to connect with, they'll make, if they're nice people, they'll make the time for you. It's the ones where they just send I get emails sometimes from people without a subject line and the one sentence of can you help me with storyline ? I can, but give me something, you know what I mean? So really try to make connections. I would start with that. It would be my number one tip.
Yeah, and again, know who you're talking to as well. I mean, Tim was very, I think, kind in his introduction for me, but I am not everyone's cup of tea because I do call it out if I don't like it. And if you don't like that, you probably don't want to work with me, and that's fine. There's a lot of wonderful other people in the world that will walk on eggshells with you. I'm not that person. So
and know why you're reaching out to that particular person. Don't just reach out because you see their name pop up on LinkedIn. I mean, there's a lot of people in our industry, without naming names, where their names pop up as experts in L&D, and Cara and I are like, who are these people? I don't know where they came from.
Can we name names in another webinar? That'd be fun.
Maybe. We'll do e-learning career chats after dark.
Perfect. Love it.
But know why you're reaching out to that person, not just because they're the loudest voice on LinkedIn, but because there's something about that person that you want to learn from. That would be my answer to that. Okay.
Love it.
I apologize. We didn't get to everyone's questions. So here's what we're going to do. This is what I'm going to suggest. I suggest this at the end of every webinar. If we didn't answer your question and you want to get your question answered, you can continue the conversation in the e-learning designers community. It's 100% free community. We're up to like over 500 members now over the course of like 5 minutes. That's just blowing my mind away. It's not 800,000 like, the Articulate community, but 500 is a good number. So that's out there, and you can continue the conversation with Cara or I or anybody else in the industry. Join us next week. This time, location, I'll be having Betty Danowitz on, and we'll be talking about I'm really looking forward to this, talking about dealing with imposter syndrome in L&D. That is something I think everybody suffers from. Even if you don't know what imposter syndrome is, I promise you will know what it is because you've had it before. And if you've never had imposter syndrome, you're probably, they probably need help, would be my answer on that. Yeah. And then finally, before I let Cara close out telling us where you can find her, even though it's probably really easy to find Cara, for anyone out there looking to build your portfolio, grow your e-learning career, grow your skills, check out the eLearning Designers Academy. And I put that in chat, and our enrollment will be opening again on July 6th. So feel free to check that out. Cara, thank you so much for coming. This was a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate your honesty and vulnerability, and that's exactly why I wanted to have you on. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you online?
Sure. So you can find me on either LinkedIn or Twitter at Cara North 11. And if you are interested, I did launch yesterday. I'm doing a community service ID cohort. So there's a nonprofit here in Columbus that does a lot of community outreach that has an LMS they haven't touched, and they have a lot of great content. And so I reached out to them and said, hey, do you need some help? And they said yes. And so I'd like to get a small team together to work on this, give you experience with a real client, let you touch an LMS, let you deal with that stuff, get a portfolio piece out of it, and then also get a reference for your future job. So if you're interested,
practical experience too.
Practical experience, and it's a nice way that I can help a small group of people, and be very strategic with my time as well. So if you're interested in that, you can find that on LinkedIn or Twitter. I tweeted that out, and I think I closed applications on that June the 11th. So you still have time to put in the application, and I'll pick people out of that pool.
That's awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Cara, for joining us, and thank you all for attending and all the awesome questions you submitted. And I hope to see you all around in the future. Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Thanks.